I mean, to go to a festival with an unfinished movie is a killer.
Yeah.
But I always like to say I survived. And the funny thing is, sometimes, you know, I showed the movie to my wife, the canned version, and then she came and saw it recently, and, you know, I don't think she noticed any difference. So at some point you realize, like, okay, the sound of the jacket being a little louder, you know, maybe people will survive if they don't hear that.
Turkey touches Zany.
The days of ours. Oh, look at you.
Come here.
Look at you. A young man. First day of the rest of your life.
You look absolutely gorgeous.
I look like a total idiot.
No, you don't.
I can't even have a normal knapsack.
A normal knapsack? Why would you want a normal knapsack when you can have this? This is an attaché case. This is Class A1. This says, I am ready to work. I come as a student.
You just want me to be like you.
What?
You just want me to be like you.
No. No, big boy. I want you to be a whole lot better than me. That's what I want.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Today you know him from so many different films he's done, and currently Armageddon Time, which stars Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong and Anthony Hopkins, and is a welcome return to your New York roots here. Welcome, James Gray.
Thank you. How are you?
Thanks for joining us. And
Good to be here.
you're back shooting in New York, but this is your first sort of, do I call it an autobiographical movie in its own way?
I'm supposed to say very, very personal. I
Very-
don't know. You know, to me, it's, you know, it doesn't make a difference. But although I shouldn't say that, because autobiography, and you can make an autobiographical film, but that doesn't have some of your soul in it, right? The facts of the case are the same.
That's right.
But in this case, yeah, it's pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah, and it's an interesting trend. Maybe it always has been, but directors at one point or
Yeah.
another tend
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do their own story. You know, this year we have Steven Spielberg,
Yeah.
Sam Mendes to a degree with Empire of Light. Last year, Kenneth Branagh. It
Yeah.
seems to be
Yeah.
prevalent now.
I mean, I have a theory as to why that is, but I'm not sure it's that pleasant a theory, which is, you know, when you see what the cinema is and what it's meant to a whole bunch of us, and then you see that the home experience and the couch is beckoning, you start to worry about the medium itself.
Right.
And I know, speaking personally and also to other filmmaker friends of mine, that there's a kind of existential fear that, you know, we want to get it out before, you know, while we can.
Right.
Because you're right, it's a long tradition. It's a beautiful tradition. But I think it's filmmakers, especially even after COVID, you know, kind of feeling like we need to get personal now.
I think that was definitely the case with these recent films.
Yeah.
I heard Branagh talking about that. I've heard Mendes talking
Yeah.
about it. And I heard Spielberg actually defending the fact that he did it now because he said, I'm not retiring. This
Yeah.
is not my end.
Yes.
But he wanted to make sure, but he felt like now's kind of the right time. Directors fearing we may not have cinema to do this?
I don't think the fear is that completely.
Yeah.
I think what it is, you know, it may take on a slightly different form. The type of movies may change. Maybe they'll be a little bit more interactive. Maybe video games will meet movies and it'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't know. I like to think people will want to basically leave their houses every now and then.
Yeah.
But there's no question but that the last like 2.5 years have been very brutal on our minds and on our bodies. And, you know, you start to look inward, you know, you're sitting on your couch for 3 straight months or whatever it is. It almost demands introspection. So that's what I think anyway.
And they all seem to be set in the childhood
Yeah.
area, too, of that.
Well, that's, I mean, the, you know, formative moment, you know, and for me, the movie that I always wanted to rip off was 400 Blows because,
Oh, yes.
yeah, I mean, it's an incredible film. In that movie, he said that,
Francois Truffaut.
Francois Truffaut, of course, he said, you know, a 13-year-old boy, his feelings matter too, and his life matters, and it's in his point of view, and his experience is like the mythic journey of any hero.
Yeah.
And that was, I remember seeing that as a 13-year-old, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how seriously it took childhood. So it seems to be right. It seems to be that age, right? 12, 13, when everything seems to be shifting in the world.
Yeah. And for this story, Armageddon Time, which, if I have to say it 100 times, people say Armageddon Time. Is that like, you know, big explosions and things? No, it's not. It's
the opposite,
actually,
right?
The title comes from a reggae song.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a reggae song by Willie Williams,
Yeah.
written in 1977, and then The Clash re-recorded it.
Yeah.
And I only heard about it originally through The Clash. The Willie Williams song, which is amazing, is very major key, and it's all about Jehovah, and it's very upbeat, and he sort of sings like, you know, a lot of people won't get no supper tonight. It's like upbeat. And then The Clash took it and made it really dark and dangerous.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that song and hearing The Clash and almost being afraid of them. Which is a weird thing to admit now, but that's the way I felt, you know.
That's interesting.
Same way you feel about like Sid Vicious, right? Something sort of scary about the Sex Pistols, you know.
But now you've named one of your movies after it, so.
I did, well, you know, because I fell in love, you know. Well, my whole reference point for popular music was like Yellow Submarine, the Beatles, which, by the way, I still think they're tops. Who doesn't? But my view of the world changed, you know, with reggae and with rap, and then of course with punk.
Yeah. So this movie has a lot of themes: racism, you know, what our schools are teaching, all kinds of things creeping in.
Yeah.
Right there, in the Reagan was running for president,
right
in that period of time. And why specifically that time?
Even though I was only 11 years old, I have a very clear recollection of the moment, and it felt like something shifted. Now, I think it's probably because I had two big heroes at that point in my life. I had Muhammad Ali and I had the Beatles.
Right.
And they both represented integrity to me. Yeah. I knew about Ali not boxing for 3 years because of Vietnam. I knew about the Beatles leaving touring and just going into the studio. And really within a 3-month period at the end of 1980, you had Ali losing in humiliating fashion to Larry Holmes. You had John Lennon's murder and Ronald Reagan's election. And it seemed once and for all that the 1960s were being left behind, finally. The 70s had been some kind of weird hangover. And with 1980 and Ronald Reagan's election came a very different country.
Yeah, very different. And, and of course, this family, I love the scenes where they're talking, they can't stand him and are worried about this.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
You know, it's like something we're doing now. You know, it's like, it's
100%.
very relevant to today, oddly enough, even though it was 40 years ago.
Yeah, of course. You almost see the same sort of, the same scenes playing out, except the names are a little bit different. My parents were, I didn't know much about Reagan's politics or anything like that. But I just remember my parents would be talking about, they say, he was better when he acted with the monkey. And I didn't know what they were talking about. It's like,
Bonzo, man.
Yeah, of course, now I know.
You watch TCM.
Now I know. Now I know, but you know, I was 11 years old, and they're talking about a guy on TV talking about nuclear war, and they're saying he was better with the monkey. I thought, what monkeys he plays? Is he in the circus? I didn't know what they were talking about. Now I know.
That's so funny.
Yeah, well, that was my introduction to Ronald Reagan, the man with the monkey in the movies.
Interestingly enough, your father, who's so prevalent in this movie, played beautifully, I think, by Jeremy Strong, was living at the time you were making this film.
He was.
And he had since died, but before it opened. But.
Yeah, he died 2 months after we finished the film. I mean, much as everybody's going through it, he got COVID, and he was quite old and didn't make it. I was on very good terms with him, and of course, I'm very sad that he's gone. I think of him often. My children were very affected by it, as well as you can imagine. And yet, if I'm to be honest with you, I have to confess a little bit that there's a slight measure of relief that I have that he never saw the movie. Because I don't know what his reaction would be to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a complicated person.
Had he seen the script, though? Or?
No, I would never have shown him that.
Oh.
Although it's funny, I remember after one of my films, and I won't say which, he said, I wish you'd show me the script. I said, really? Yeah, because I would have helped you, you know, I would have made improvements on that thing, and it would have been a better picture. It's like, thank you, Dad.
Everyone's a critic.
Everyone's a critic. But there's something I think weird about this, Pete, where everybody thinks, like you and I would never go to Seattle or South Carolina to Boeing and complain about the shape of the wing, right? We would never think we outclass some engineer. And you know, people come to me all the time, they go, I could have fixed your movie. And you're like the dentist, you know. Like, you know what, I think that third act's a little slow. You're like, what? You're my dentist. I don't know, everyone thinks they can do it.
Yeah.
Maybe they can.
Well, how do you know when the movie is just what you wanted to make? And I assume the movie that we have now, it premiered in Cannes.
That's right.
And after Cannes, you went back and changed a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't change what, yes, you're correct, but there were things I needed to do to the film that I just didn't have time to do. It was not like I changed my mind or anything like that. What happened was, it was like, you know, the bad thing in grade school where, you know, pencils down, you know, it was like in order to make Cannes.
Right, yeah.
And we hadn't yet gotten a few lines from Tony Hopkins. A couple of pieces of music hadn't yet been recorded.
This was your 5th time in Cannes with a filming competition.
That's right.
Which is quite a record to be constantly asked back with your new film. Was it important for you? I know you weren't finished with it, but was it important to play Cannes? Or you could have waited until the fall?
It depends on whether I'm supposed to tell you the absolute truth or not.
Yes, the absolute, only the absolute truth.
The absolute truth. The absolute truth. That's what you're hearing. It's a very big honor for Cannes to invite the film, but it's not that important to me. There are, you know, for whatever reason, films I've made have performed very well in France, and they really love it when there's that little like palm frond thing in the front of the movie. It doesn't mean anything to me or you, but it matters to them, and so as it's my way of sort of thanking that market, if I may be so blatant about it. But really, I would prefer to have gone with a finished film, maybe the fall. Not that I'm unhappy we went, but it doesn't mean all that much to me. It's the first or second time it's very beautiful and I sound spoiled. Now it's just like terror when the film plays, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know how it is, or maybe you don't, maybe because it's uniquely awful for a movie director in one way. And Steven Soderbergh put it brilliantly once. He said, seeing your own movie in Cannes is like being forced to sit there and study every frame of your movie for 30 seconds. Like at the premiere, because you have to dress up, you know, in black tie. You know,
twice a night. They
twice a night.
Like the Oscars.
It's madness. And it's like you're sitting there with like, you know, a room full of, I don't know, like Vichy collaborators or something. You don't even know who these people are. It's like random people from the south of France. And you sit there and the movie plays and you're kind of like this and and you know, because the end of the movie can come.
Right.
And they might boo.
Yeah.
And they do boo. I've heard people say, yeah, you got a long standing ovation. It all gets standing. No.
Yeah.
Because I've been on the jury.
Right.
And you watch the movie with the audience when you're on the jury.
Yes.
I will tell you, half the time,
they boo.
They have those seats that when you get up and they go thwap, like that.
Yeah.
They make that
Oh,
noise.
that's the worst, yeah.
Oh my God, and they walk out and they're en masse, thwap, 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 thwap. And I was like, can you imagine? So your nightmare is that.
Yeah.
That your film is playing, you're sitting there in black tie, thwap, 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 thwap. And by the end, and they're booing.
Oh my God.
That does happen.
Yeah. This movie, Armageddon Time, I mentioned, is your return to New York, your New York roots, your films, you know, We Own the Night and Two Lovers, The Immigrant, Little Odessa, The Yards, all set in and around the general area there.
That's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
You made like 1,000 movies. By the way, it was not always easy to make a movie. It's still not easy, but it was not always a given that you could shoot in New York.
Right.
When I did the first 3, which were Little Odessa, The Yards, and We Own the Night, they had not yet made any kind of tax rebate help. Right. So I remember I would write the script, give it to line producer, right? And line producer would say, yeah, very nice. How do you like Toronto? Now, Toronto is a beautiful city.
Yes.
But I never thought, A, that it looked anything like New York.
No.
B, you always had an issue with the day players, right? So you'd have a scene with a New York guy, and then all of a sudden the day player would come in, and go, "You want some coffee, eh?" You know what I mean? And then then the illusion would be shattered. So I will say this, not to be Mr. Self-aggrandizing, but I did always stick to my guns on that.
Yeah.
I had to shoot in New York, and it's one of the reasons why there's actually a lengthy time gap between films, because I could have done them in Toronto and I didn't.
Right.
Now it's a bit easier. There's it's a production center again, because they passed all these rebates, and thankfully it's come back a bit.
It seems important for these, particularly for this film, I have to say, that sense
Where
of
else could you do it?
authenticity, and it's you, even though the names are changed and all of that, it's you. By the way, the two young actors are just fantastic.
They're incredible,
in this.
those kids.
And
they're like geniuses. It's
yeah,
bizarre.
and they really, this movie can live or die on that casting.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you that, and you found both of them are wonderful.
Yeah, they are
actors.
great. It's funny. I gave the script to a very close friend of mine who's, I won't say his name because he's a wonderfully successful screenwriter. And he said, why do you want to make this? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you're not going to be able to pull this off. I said, thank you for the compliment, the compliment and the confidence vote. He said, yeah, but here's the problem. He said, you're never going to find two kids who could do that.
Yeah.
He said, if you can, okay.
Right.
He said, but where are you going to find kids who can do that?
Yeah.
And the truth is, they're out there. I mean, we read, I think, 600 or so
Wow.
for each character. And I had a fantastic casting director who I've worked with on almost all my films, a guy named Doug Abel out of New York. And he just sent me tape after tape after tape after tape. I remember the morning ritual. I'd open up the laptop, I'd get a cup of coffee, play, one after the other. And you can't, the problem is you can't speed past them. You have to watch all of them that he says are worth watching.
Right.
Because sometimes a kid would start off and wouldn't be that interesting and then get beautiful. You would see something amazing happen. And the opposite would also be true. But that's why you had to watch all of them.
Yeah.
But it's actually a beautiful experience in the end.
Because you can find that right thing that's not a slick kid actor.
Exactly.
That's,
Exactly. I remember there was once a story I worked with, and you'll know who this is, I worked with a great legendary actor, Maximilian Schell, on my first movie.
Of course.
And I said to him, well, how was it to work with Vittorio De Sica?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it was fantastic, but he had very simple praise. I said, what would he say? He would say, good, very good, great, Lombardo. So I would say, I don't understand that. That was the man in Bicycle Thieves, who was a non-professional.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he would say that was the peak of achievement, because it was like greater than acting. All of a sudden, it achieved a kind of truth, a verisimilitude. And so with kids, you're quite right. You cannot get somebody who's super polished.
Right.
They do exist.
Yeah.
But there's something smart alecky about them in not a natural way. Yeah. And with kids who are not 100% polished, it can feel quite real.
Yeah.
That's
they
what I
are,
was
and
after.
it's a heartbreaking kind of story.
It certainly is, yeah.
It really is, especially as life took them in different directions.
Yeah.
And
somebody said to me, "Oh, do we need to see a heartbreaking story? I mean, why do we need to see this?" And my attitude was like, problems aren't fixed.
Right.
And
that's for sure.
we got some issues.
Yeah.
And it's our duty to talk about them and not to say everything's okay.
Yeah. It's amazing. Now, I'm really curious before we go. I have to talk about the two movies you made not set in New York. I liked both of them very much. I'm on the record whenever in fact, Lost City of Z or Z, depending on who you are, it haunted me. It really did. I see so many movies, but that one's always stuck in my head. I just thought there was something about how you did that, and that whole trip, and that whole, adventure that they were on there, and the way it played out, and it wasn't like a blockbuster studio adventure movie.
Yeah. Well, the movie almost killed me, though. I mean, I'm actually not kidding. That was first of all, look. It's not about me saying good or bad, but I feel very close to that film. I love it as an experience in my life. I brought my wife and children to Amazonia and to the UK, and we
Right.
spent a year traveling the world. But I will tell you, the jungle does not want you there. And that is,
The jungle did not want them there.
I did not want them there. And I tell you, for the first 2 weeks, I remember I was sitting there, I was like, in the jungle, and I was like, I'm doing it, And then after week 2, I remember, I woke up 4:30 in the morning, because the bugs wake you up.
Yeah.
You don't need an alarm clock. Put my glasses on, all wet from the humidity. You take the rainwater shower where you pull the chain and the rainwater
Right.
comes on you. And you're sleeping in very Spartan conditions in the middle.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of the jungle, the middle of Colombia,
Yeah.
somewhere in the Amazon. And a certain kind of terror does creep in. And we would go on the river. One day, I remember, I was working and I saw something that looked like it ran on the banks of the river. I thought, oh my God, is that like a crocodile or something? So I called over my Colombian producer, who was terrific, and I said, are there crocodiles in the river? We were in the Don Diego River, I remember. And he said, no, Mr. James, no crocodiles, it's fine. So I said, okay. And then I saw it.
Right.
And it was there. I said, oh my God, there it is. He goes, it's a black caiman, it's not a crocodile. I said, oh, I don't know why I accepted this, but at the time I said, oh, okay, that's fine, just a black
sure.
caiman, that's fine. I get back to the editing room months later, and I told my editor this story. He says, yeah, those are absolutely deadly and much worse than crocodiles.
Oh my God.
I mean, we were in the river
Yeah.
with them.
All right.
So there was a kind of madness
Well,
to
it felt very authentic.
Oh, good.
And an Ad Astra
Yeah.
with Brad Pitt
Yeah.
took us to outer space. I mean, you're going from the Amazon to outer space, and
Yeah.
this is a guy who's made his movies close to home.
Well, I was trying to stretch,
Yeah.
and the outer space thing, I'd always had an obsession with the Apollo missions, and I grew up with them, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, these guys, it was like a big deal. I remember when I was in the Cub Scouts, which I have to confess, I wasn't very good at and all that, but I remember that the Cub Scout leader, he made us act a play of like the Apollo 11 mission. It was very much in our
Right.
spirit. And I'd always wanted to do a science fiction movie, but I wanted to take Kubrick's and Spielberg's beautiful films, which I love so much, and I wanted to say, okay, let me turn it on its ear, because those films, in very different ways,
Yeah.
they talk about aliens and what aliens could mean for our species.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's kind of a belief in God in a way.
Yeah.
Good gods or bad gods, or in the case of a black monolith, anything you want to project on it, but still believing in God. And I wanted to say, what if there's nothing out there, and the human soul is the infinite, and that actually we should be looking back to Earth, not trying to go outward, that it's all here. So that was really the ambition of the film, was to try and turn all that on its head. I mean, that's what you dream of. But that's part of the reason I wanted to come back to New York, because, I mean, those movies were very logistically difficult,
Right,
and I was beat. I mean, that was like 5 straight years of that.
Yeah. Well, they're very ambitious, but
They really are. It's nuts. It's a little nuts.
But you pulled it off.
Oh, thank you. I already liked you, Pete. Thank you.
I have to say, and Armageddon Time is another example of that too. Thank you, James Gray,
Thank you.
for joining us.
Thanks so much, Pete.